What is up? About to get it popping here in a second. You know the drill. We're already way behind. We're supposed to be at work at 2 p.m., boys and girls and theys. It's gonna be a close one. As in, it's gonna be. I'm guaranteeing myself that I'm gonna be late. But hey, for you guys, anything. For you people, for the people that I care about the most out there on the internet that I've never met. Some of you I've met. Some of you I know. But for the most part, the rest of you guys, the real strangers out there, the people that I don't know where their ideals and where their beliefs lie, those are the most important people to this show. I'm kidding. You guys are still cool though. Don't worry. I still love you. I just don't know you. Knowing someone to love them is overrated. NFL Twitter. Let's go. What else? Let's go Houston. Podcast. And what else should we do? Should we do Twitch? Should we do YouTube? Right? Yeah, by the way, simulcast at YouTube been doing alright, I would say. Hold on. We're about to power through this episode, guys. You know the drill. I'm already way behind. Oh, man. Alright. Twitch is popping off. I gotta figure out a way to auto post to fucking Facebook. Alright. Probably should have done a sound check before. Actually, I still can because it won't close. Shout out. Hold on. 3, 2, 1. Alright. Sound check's done. Let's get it popping, ladies and gents. It's time to turn up. 3, 2, 1. Oh, gotta mute myself. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody else in between, I'm Ashton Gene Lewis. This is the Broke Boys Sports Podcast, which you can find and listen to pretty much anywhere you listen to podcasts: Spotify, iHeartRadio, Podchaser, of course, Apple Podcasts. If you want to leave a review, go ahead and do that. I don't know what it means, but I hear that's how you become rich doing this. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts if you're a cool cat like me. Also hit me up on Twitter, FB_playbook. Hit me up on Instagram at The Ashton Forever. My burner account on Instagram is The Mood of Sports if you want to follow it for some reason. By the way, I swear, I kid you not, like 5 people a week are following my spam account, my burner account on Instagram for some reason. But hey, you know, such is life, right? Anyway, other stuff to talk about. This is the NFL only episode of the week. You know the drill. We only talk about the NFL on this one. The ticker has the updated scores from week 3. We're going to blaze through this because you guessed it, ladies and gents, I'm already way behind. I have to be at work in 19 minutes, and you know for a fact we're not going to make that, but guess what we're going to do? We're going to talk about every single game from week 4 of the NFL season, but first, we have some things to talk about, some things to clear up. It is week 3, so that means that the pick'em that I'm currently in, the straight-up money line picks and then my spread picks are officially done. On ESPN, I have like this group going, and on top of that, for my pick'em, my money line picks, I actually bet money on my bookie. I don't know why I said the specific site because they don't pay me to say that. Anyway, I'm up by quite a bit in terms of the pick'ems right now. I currently overall 33-15. I'm using the same picks that I do on the show on every Thursday episode, and 12-4 so far. I was 12-4 in week 3, and I think that's the season high so far because we got 2 weeks of 11-5. Also, sorry, I have like a respiratory infection right now. It is not COVID. It is something that, as an asthmatic kid who has now become an allergy fiend as he's grown up, you get respiratory infections every once in a while, and it's usually around this time of the year because spring has sprung, and so is the pollen. Pollen's out in the streets. The pollen be outside, if you know what that means. 33-15 overall so far in the pick'ems. That puts me in the top 1% of people on the ESPN Pick'em League. Of course, that's going to dip in some way, shape, or form. I can't I can only do so much analysis that's going to help me predict the crazy stuff that happens in the NFL season. Like, for instance, I did one of my crazy games where I was just like, this seems unlikely to happen, is one of the games that panned out for me really, really well. If you listen to last Thursday episode, you know which one I'm talking about. But the spread pick'em so far, we actually recovered pretty well. We missed week 1 in the pick'em league. But we are at 15-17 on the season so far right now. So we're about 2 away from being over 500. Good picks against the spread, especially if you're like gambling, is 55%. So we're pretty close to that. We start off chronologically. Thursday Night Football, I already did a breakdown of it on the last Thursday's episode. Last Thursday's episode, or last Friday's episode, because we recorded on Friday, specifically for the reason to be able to talk about Thursday Night Football. But for the most part, backup rookie quarterback, plus the Panthers defense seems to be legit. They haven't played a ton of like high-level competition so far in this season, and I think that's what a lot of people are very wary about, especially considering their offense was highly inconsistent. I get it, the Texans defense made some good plays. They got some key stops in different moments. By the way, still, like, the Texans defense is actually looking good this season. It would have been dope if they had like a competent offense. They probably would have won this game versus the Panthers, especially since they held them to 24 points. And it does not seem like Sam Darnold is in the position. He has improved drastically because his teammates around him have improved. What a surprise. You play with more talented teammates, you win more games. But it doesn't seem like he's in a position to go into a back and forth with opponents. And right now, they're kind of eating the trash of the NFL, and they're doing their thing. They're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. They're going out there and they're cooking it up. And on that note, we talk about Thursday Night Football. There's a lot of key moments in that. Of course, the loss of Christian McCaffrey hurt all you fantasy owners. Once again, I'd like to remind everyone, I do not give a shit about your fantasy team, so stop tweeting at me about them. I make comments about players, and people think that I'm immediately talking about fantasy football wise stuff. And I'm like, no, I legitimately watch football to enjoy football. I do not talk about everything in regards to football in the guise of fantasy. It actually never even crosses my mind until I have the app open and I'm looking at my roster, which is probably why I only win like one of my 7 leagues every year. So anyway, we move on. I'd be remiss if I didn't do the thing that you're here for, the thing that you want the most. For me to talk about the most valuable, important player in the NFL this season, it's this week's nuke for week 3 of the NFL season. If you follow me on TikTok, I already did my image of the week TikTok. So if you want to check out what I thought was the best image this week out of all the NFL photographers or out of all the images taken, please check it out. It's actually very, very majestic. It gives you Lion King vibes. So you should definitely check it out on my TikTok at The Ashton Forever. I also posted it on my personal Twitter. It's not private, but my personal Twitter at The Ashton J. So if you want to check that out. But moving on, the nuke for this week, the player this week that's not a quarterback that basically decided whether or not everybody won or lost their game. It's pretty obvious if you watch the game. He had a killer game overall. He actually wasn't even the leading receiver on his team, but he also had another aspect of his game that gave him a little bit of a boost if you're in a PPR league. And it is, of course, one Cooper Kupp. The nuke this week is Cooper Kupp. He had 9 catches, so that's 9 points if you're in a PPR league, plus the 96 yards over there. He had 2 touchdowns. He actually outscored multiple quarterbacks in traditional fantasy football league default stuff like that, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, Cooper Kupp is this week's nuke player. If you don't know who he is the many could argue possession receiver on steroids, but I've also struggled with the fact that people use possession receiver as if it's an insult, like catching the ball is a bad thing, which is always interesting to talk about people who claim to like basketball, but then they're like, oh, all he does is play defense. It's like, it's kind of an important part of the game. And also, like, you wouldn't say the same thing about players who only play offense. So, who only go out there and get buckets. So, anyway, yeah, Cooper Kupp, the nuke for this week in fantasy football. If you had him, he probably decided your matchup, and it wasn't even close in some of those cases. I saw at least 2 people, one in a media league that I'm in, and then the other one in the actual money league that I'm in, actually get completely roasted by Cooper Kupp. So that was pretty interesting. That's how I kind of picked up on it. Anyway, we move on. Talking about more football, which is of course what you want. We'll start here in chronological order, and I'll try to keep the jokes to a minimum because some of these games were hilarious this week. The Cardinals beat the Jaguars 31-19. Nobody's surprised about that. My analysis last week was literally complete silence for about 5 seconds, and here's why. People were losing it like temporarily on Twitter. It was 13-7 at halftime, right? And one of those touchdowns scored by the Jaguars because they were leading 13-7 at halftime. James Agnew ran back a 68-yard field goal attempt, which would have been the longest field goal ever made in NFL history. Keep that in mind. The actual longest field goal ever made comes up a little bit later. It was an attempt. James Agnew runs it back for a touchdown, joining two people who were currently tied for the lead because it's impossible to run back a 110-yard field goal because 110 yards would mean that you landed out of bounds basically and caught the ball and fielded it. Anyway, Antonio Cromartie and Cordero Patterson are also recipients of 109 or guys who made a 109-yard touchdown happen, and James Agnew joins them. He actually did it in back-to-back weeks. He did not do 109 yards, but he had a special teams touchdown in back-to-back weeks, which makes him one of the few to ever do that in NFL history. Outside of that amazing, absolutely stunning play by James Agnew, the Jags fumbled the ball 4 times. They lost 2 of them. Trevor Lawrence threw 2 interceptions. One of those is a flea flicker that literally 0 Cardinals players fell for, which, by the way, the sad dying of the light of the flea flicker, one of the most exciting plays in all of football, is a little heartbreaking, but nonetheless, this one was actually scored a touchdown. The flea flicker scored a touchdown for the Cardinals. Byron Murphy intercepted and ran it back for a pick 6. He got sacked 3 times. One of those was on a 3rd down, which is like the last drive of the game, so it kind of doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Oh, also, 5 of the 12 drives that the Jaguars had were 3 and outs. Yeah, 3 downs and out. Punted the ball away. The Cardinals got 24 points off offense. 17 of those points were in the second half, which is a little concerning, especially considering they were playing the Jacksonville Jaguars. And it, once again, major red flag. Very similar to the situation I had where the Bills played the Dolphins last week and they got a shutout, but the offense didn't look spectacular. We'll talk about what happened this week because apparently I offended someone. So yeah, the Cardinals get the easy win here. I wouldn't say easy. They were down at halftime. But nonetheless, the second half of this game, they fell. The Jags fell apart completely. About as complete of a fall apart as you can possibly do it. And for a second there, I think people who were in Jaguars media, which, by the way, good luck to you. I don't know how. I mean, they've had like one good year in the past 2 decades, right? Or 2 good years because they made it to the AFC Championship game in like the 90s or the early 2000s, one of those years. But yeah, it's rough. It really is. Anyway, but yeah, to a certain degree, it's a little concerning how it wasn't all that impressive of a win. The final score makes it look really impressive. But nonetheless, they got the dub, and that's all that matters. At the end of the day, it doesn't have to look impressive. But for a team that's getting the level of hype they are because of the amazing plays that Kyler Murray is making, you have to ask yourself, why does he have to make those plays? AJ Green back at it again. DeAndre Hopkins out there with broken ribs apparently, playing really well. And Rondale Moore, big time Purdue guy who played in the Big Ten, panning out to actually be the offensive threat that he was promised to be out of college. You love to see that kind of stuff. Falcons versus Giants. First and foremost, shout out to anybody who watched this game. Yeah, that's all I'll say. Shout out to anybody who watched this game when it was all said and done, because it was rough, especially considering one of these teams didn't score until the second half. Anyway, Matt Ryan didn't get the memo about what's supposed to happen this season for the Falcons, and he's making it very, very clear. Better watch himself. I'm just saying. I know Jack Easterby's not in the front office for the Falcons, but that doesn't mean accidents don't happen. You know what I mean? The Giants almost had this game clinched up after Saquon Barkley. By the way, I was correct. Saquon Barkley had some absolutely astounding plays in the course of this game. There were a lot of, for a guy whose knee was completely shattered, he's still moving flash-like quickness. Very scary level of movement from Saquon Barkley if you go back and watch this game in full. But yeah, Saquon Barkley leaping into the end zone from like 4 yards out, like he got the ball, ran forward 2 yards, jumped forward, and ended up in the end zone, even though other people were trying to stop him. It was crazy. But nonetheless, they took a 14-7 lead, and there was a little over 12 minutes left in the game. The Falcons go down into the end zone, cut that in half, They get down to the 15-yard line, and Matt Ryan nearly throws an interception that would have ended this game. It was a guy who comes up a little bit later on. They get another play. It was caught. The ball was caught and then dropped upon landing on the ground, which of course makes it an incomplete interception or makes it an incomplete pass. The Falcons scored a TD a few plays later because the same guy who dropped the interception, Adoree Jackson, if you're a Tennessee Titans fan, you're very familiar with Adoree Jackson. If you're a USC guy, you're familiar with him too. Immensely athletic young man who played his ball at USC, played for the Tennessee Titans, and kind of was trying to figure out his way in the NFL in terms of how he's going to be utilized. He took a big old bag from the Giants. He was one of the last people to be signed in free agency, and actually very surprising the amount of money that they gave him in that contract. And I think the Giants were going for like a whole finally getting like two corners that they can depend upon to go out there and be great, in James Bradbury and Adoree Jackson. But hey, so far, I mean, it's kind of hard to assess the quality of the Giants as a team, but you know what I mean. Anyway, they get the ball at the 15-yard line. Matt Ryan almost throws an interception, and then a play later, Kyle Pitts gets a pass interference call because Adoree Jackson pre-tackles him. He pre-orders a tackle on him, and they get the ball a little bit closer, and then they score the touchdown that would tie the game up. The Falcons get a stop on defense. Yes, you read that. You heard that correctly. The Falcons get a stop on defense, which at this point during the game, there's under 6 minutes. Actually, it's under 4 minutes ticking away on this one. And pretty much every Falcons fan is running through all the possible simulations of how the Atlanta Falcons can go out here and blow this game because they get the ball back on offense. They were probably thinking of something truly horrifying, like a meteorite falling out of the sky, killing Cordero Patterson right before he crosses the end zone, which of course would have not counted as a touchdown, and it would have given the win to the Giants in some way, shape, or form. They're probably thinking all kinds of horrible things. A loose Gator track cart rolls onto the field and drives over Matt Ryan, forcing him to fumble the ball that the Giants recover and run it back for a touchdown, and they end the game, right? I will point this out. Cordero Patterson and Kyle Pitts team up. They get 2 catches in the course of this final drive from the Atlanta Falcons after that Falcons stop, right? Cordero Patterson, by the way, had 34% of the Falcons' total yardage in this game. Back with the vengeance. Resurgence of a career, if I've ever seen one. And Cordero Patterson at running back is dangerous. He had like a nasty stiff arm. He had a killer catch down the sideline, got out of bounds. Kyle Pitts, the rookie, goes out there and makes a clutch catch that got them in range for the field goal that eventually the man himself, the best Falcons player on the roster, Young Wei Koo, goes out there and gets the game winner for the Falcons and breaks every single New York Giants fan's heart in only a way that the Falcons fans can truly relate to. Had the game in hand, all they needed was a simple stop for the 15-yard line, and it would have been game, but it was not. It was not to be. Speaking of things that were not to be, we move on to the Ravens versus the Lions. First things first, holy shit, the Lions' defensive line was on point. They went out there and they abused Lamar Jackson, beat him down multiple times. So we'll break it down here. Lamar Jackson had 31 pass attempts. 11 of those pass attempts were pressured, and out of those 11, 4 of them were sacks. He had a fumble that he had to recover for a 5-yard loss, which is basically another sack. That also didn't include the 2 times that he had to scramble out of the pocket and gain 0 yards on those. So that was that's 3 more. So that's 3 more plays to add to the 11 pressures that they were able to pick up. So that's 14 out of 31. Almost half of the pass attempts that Lamar Jackson had were pressured. Sorry, I had to get that bubonic plague cough out. Anyway, that's where we're at in this situation. We'll talk about some other things that happened that have me convinced that something else is afoot here. Like I said, 14 plays that went horribly wrong every time that Lamar Jackson dropped back, and that's out of the 31 pass attempts, right? That's not including the stuff that happened with the run game, because the run game kind of struggled a little bit, but they kind of found their footing a little bit in the middle of this game and towards the end as well. Also, at one point during this game, Justin Tucker, who is the kicker that never misses, even no matter how far back you make him kick, he missed a field goal, which has got to be terrifying if you're a Ravens fan. It's just like, oh, it's going to be one of those days. The Ravens lost a turnover battle in this game, by the way. They had an interception. The Ravens had an interception late because Lamar Jackson was hanging out in the pocket, thought he was under pressure, realized he wasn't, hesitated and double pumped on the throw to Marquise Hollywood Brown down the field, threw it to the inside, even though Hollywood was running towards the sideline out of bounds, and it was picked off, which is understandable. That's a bad throw from Lamar Jackson, and a DB went out there and made a play. Marquise Hollywood Brown, speaking of him, Marquise Brown, 3 drops. 2 of them looked like they were going to be touchdowns. People are arguing that all 3 of them looked like they were going to be touchdowns. So you had that going on. Then you proceed to give the Ravens a shot at getting a win in this game, right? Like they complete a pass to Sammy Watkins. He lands way outside of field goal range if you're a normal kicker. Luckily for the Ravens, they don't have a normal kicker. Justin Tucker goes out there and kicks the longest field goal in NFL history to beat the Lions on the final play of the game. A 66-yard field goal that hits the crossbar and bounces over. The exact opposite of what the double doink would look like if it had been kicked by the Bears. If it had been kicked by the Bears, it would have hit all 3 of the parts of the crossbar and then bounced forward into the end zone for for a failed field goal attempt. This, of course, has me thoroughly convinced that the Lions are haunted by a ghost, and it's not a happy ghost. I don't know who it is, and maybe it's the ghost of Henry Ford, who, if you look into his background, he probably wouldn't be happy with the color of the people that are on the field playing in Lions uniforms. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, maybe it's a ghost, or maybe it's the fact that the Lions didn't score until more than halfway through the third quarter, and 30% of their drives, they had 10 drives in total. 3 of those 10 were 3 and outs. Maybe it was that, or maybe it's a ghost. Or, ladies and gentlemen, one key thing about life, it's never quite as simple as it being one thing. Maybe it's both. Last and final note on this one, Jared Goff, I am fully on to you. You're not sneaking by me. Jared Goff had 217 passing yards in this game. He went 22 of 30 from in terms of pass attempts. He had 0 passing touchdowns. All the touchdowns the Lions scored were rushing touchdowns. Jamal Williams, who has become a crowd favorite as of recent because of his love for anime, one of the blurs out there in the world that we can all appreciate. He had 0 passing touchdowns. 50 of his 217 yards were air yards, which means that the ball traveled 50 yards in the course of his 22 completions. His average depth of target completed was 2.3. Jimmy Garoppolo's got competition, ladies and gentlemen. Jimmy Garoppolo has got some big competition coming up for his yard scammer award. Anyway, Bears take on the Browns. This one, speaking of sadness, we just talked about one of the saddest endings of a game possible for the Detroit Lions, who still remain winless, as I predicted somehow. And same thing with the Colts, who remain winless on the season. The Bears and the Browns, final score in this one, 26-6, and yes, that score sounds just as sad as this game actually was. The Bears had 68 passing yards, and Justin Fields got sacked 7 times. You tell me what the hell you think happened in this game. It was bad from beginning to end. Justin Fields had multiple sacks that were a result of him taking too long to get rid of the ball, which, honestly, if you know anything about the Bears wide receiver core, it's because nobody was open. And if you know anything about the Bears offensive line, some of these sacks were 100% on the offensive line. Some of them were definitely him waiting around in the pocket too long because of the... I've heard like people who are far smarter than me talking about football reference how Justin Fields was running an offense that was basically built for a guy like Andy Dalton, not an offense built for a guy like Justin Fields. But based off of what's happened in Game 1 and Matt Nagy's track record as a coach, don't think that playbook's coming anytime soon because, I mean, Mitchell Trubisky is a mobile quarterback. He's nowhere near as mobile as 4.5 speed running Justin Fields, but if there was ever stuff that he was going to build in to his offense that would cater to a mobile quarterback, he would have already done it. So good luck to Justin Fields. Maybe Matt Nagy is the guy who maybe Justin Fields is the man who inspires Matt Nagy to possibly change his ways. Maybe he looks at the man in the mirror and decides to keep doing it because guess what? I don't think anything is going to stop what's happening at the end of this season for the Bears. The Bears defense held as long as they possibly could. Honestly, like if you go back and watch that game, they had a lot of really good plays throughout the course of that game. And honestly, they could have had more turnovers in terms of picking off Baker Mayfield. They had some great defense on a lot of good receivers. Odell Beckham Jr. coming back in this game quickly became like the secondary story because of the 7 sacks that the Cleveland Browns got in the course of this game. They got 8 pressures. The Bears defense did. The Bears defense got 8 pressures and 5 sacks on Baker Mayfield. There were also a couple of scrambles for like no yards in the course of that game. Baker flushed out of the pocket, and because of the plays that were run so deep far down the field or whatever, was able to go out there and get some easy yards without getting really touched up too much by the Bears defense, which is a perfect situation for them. I will point out there was one really weird thing that happened in this game. The first 2 possessions for the Bears offense, they went for it on 4th down, and it was turnover on downs. So, yeah, that was the first 2 possessions. Not late in the game when the game was already decided. To start off the game, they were like, no, we're getting aggressive. We're going to go for it. And to their credit, most analytics guys are going to give them a pat on the back for that, I guess. And most people who watch football and talk about football, or fans just in general, are going to call them idiots for doing that because, everybody, it's either you're a genius or you're a complete idiot for going on and for 4th down. There is no in between about it being a right or a wrong decision. It is solely a results-based thing, and that is kind of the part of the problem with society to a certain point. But hey, if sports is anything, it is a reflection of life. We can only hope that Justin Fields really does survive this season because, quite frankly, I will say this: the best part about Game 1, it probably can't get any worse. But I did tell you one of the most important aspects and life lessons you'll ever pick up, kids, is you think it can't get any worse, and life says, hold my beer, because it motherfucking can. We'll see. The Browns beat a team that were supposed to beat, led by our backup rookie quarterback. So, shout out to the Browns. The Bengals played the Steelers, and everybody was sad because Ben Roethlisberger looks cooked. Oh, who am I kidding? Nobody's sad about Ben Roethlisberger looking bad. Ben Roethlisberger has been cruising towards this for quite some time now. And I will let you know one thing and one thing only. Every journalist that covers Ben Roethlisberger either from afar or from up close every single week has been waiting for this time, waiting for this moment like nobody's business. I will tell you how Ben Roethlisberger knows that he has been acting like an ass for the last couple of years. He has unblocked everybody that he's blocked over the past couple of years. I've been on Twitter for like 6 years or 8 years or whatever on my professional account, and I've been blocked by Ben Roethlisberger, I'm pretty sure, like 5 of the 6 years that I've been on Twitter. I'm like 100% sure. I'm pretty sure I got blocked the first year that I started that the FB_playbook account with Martin when we were covering high school sports, and have been blocked ever since. He unblocked me, and the only reason I knew that is because like one photo of like him with this black lady went viral or something like that, and because I follow the Steelers topic on Twitter, it popped up, and I was like, oh wow, that's Ben Roethlisberger's Twitter handle. I shouldn't even be able to see that. And now all of a sudden Ben Roethlisberger's feeling nice and benevolent and wants to unblock all the media and stuff like that. Nobody's falling for it, my guy. This is the reckoning of an asshole that we're witnessing right now. Ben Roethlisberger he's running out of power as we speak, right in front of us, right in front of our very eyes. He had one of the saddest fat man situations ever. And I talk about this as a fat man, right? There's a couple things you can't do. You can't be out there on the field with a bunch of athletes and do unathletic things, right? You can't trip over your own feet while trying to throw the ball to somebody else because you already look slow. You already look like you're not in shape, which is not necessarily true because you can be big and in shape. Most defensive linemen in the NFL, including the defensive tackles, are in better shape than the average American and the average person. Faster, stronger, more agile, more flexible, right? That is a thing. And if you don't believe that, you probably don't know anything about sports. But anyway, Ben Roethlisberger suffered through this game, threw a pretty, I'm not going to lie, the interception that he did throw that was picked off by Wilson from the Bengals, that was crazy impressive. He was dropping down, and I'm pretty sure it's because he read run on a play action. He tripped over himself, trying to drop back into coverage in his zone, and in the process, the ball got tipped by the Bengals up front, and he was able to one-hand snag the ball right before it hit the ground. So shout out to him. That was a killer play. Joe Burrow went out there and looked like the guy that we all think that he is in terms of a quarterback. Ja'Marr Chase got wide open again. I don't know how it keeps happening, but like sometimes they be, Ja'Marr Chase just keeps running straight, and eventually nobody's around him. and he scores. But he did have a touchdown in the back of the end zone that was like he completely shook his defensive back, and we're also all convinced that he was trolling us in the preseason where he said that it was more difficult to see the football because it didn't have the white stripe on it. So, yeah, shout out to Jamar Chase with the Lil Nas X level trolling on that one. Bengals 24, Steelers 10 in that one. The Colts took on the Titans. This game was interesting. One, it is a divisional game for the AFC South, so it's vastly important. These are probably the two top teams in the AFC South They are the two top teams in the AFC South right now. Final score is 25-16. The Colts defense got 3 turnovers, and they got 13 points out of it, right? That's pretty abysmal, right? That's super abysmal because one of them was a touchdown and the other two were field goals out of that situation. I'm perplexed by the Colts' decision in this game to completely abandon the run. They had 16 carries combined between Nyheim Hines and Jonathan Taylor because obviously Carson Wentz is going to carry you to victory. We also saw this happen, the situation I'm describing right now, we saw this happen with another quarterback who currently plays for the Eagles. We'll talk about that when we get to it. But that's combined, 16 carries combined between their two top running backs, and both of those running backs had multiple carries for over 10 yards. Yeah, like that kind of stuff. The Colts had 2 drives that were inside of the Titans' 10-yard line that they did not go for. They had one at the 9-yard line, and they had one at the 5-yard line that turned into field goals, and I'm pretty sure that's what put the nail in the coffin for this situation because they did not punish the Titans for scoring those turnovers. There was a lot of great defense that was played on the perimeter, but for the most part, the Titans remembered that they have absolute monster that plays running back, and they utilized him very much so because Derrick Henry had more carries and yards than Nyheim Hines and Jonathan Taylor combined on the ground. And you can talk about, oh man, it's because the score got out of hand. The score in this game did not get out of hand. It was a 1-possession game. Sorry about that. In the fourth quarter, it was 22-13. Other than that, every other aspect of this game, it is a 1-possession game. And they just completely abandoned the run and put the game squarely on Carson Wentz's shoulders for some reason. He went out there, he made a couple of good plays. There's no question about that. It's not like he went out there and he played like Trevor Lawrence has been playing or Zach Wilson has been playing. But nonetheless, they have talented players and they're cutting themselves off from their offensive talent for the sake of Carson Wentz. And I think that's just poor coaching decisions. We'll see if they bounce back from it like later on in the season. But I mean, to go out that way versus the Titans in a very winnable game that was really close down, even though the Titans went out there, lost the turnover battle by a bunch. That's how bad the coaching decisions have to be and the play decisions have to be because you went out there, you won the turnover battle by 2, and then you lose the game by multiple possessions. That's horrendous. It's terrible. That's not a path to success. You can't do that against other playoff teams. But anyway, by the way, weird fact, Ryan Tannehill got officially pressured 2 times in this game. I'm going to tell you this right now. We all know the Titans' offensive line is not great. They're like bottom of mediocre. And I think even Titans fans would tell you that. That is an indicator of how bad the Colts' D-line has gotten. And maybe it was just this game in particular or something like that. But man, 2 pressures on Ryan Tannehill, who's already one of the best mobile quarterbacks in the NFL. Jesus, man. There you go. That's the Colts for you. I mean, they seem like last season, they looked like they took a lot of steps forward. And then ever since this whole Carson Wentz thing has shown up, they're acting like they have a franchise quarterback. And they're making decisions like they have a franchise quarterback. Carson Wentz had 37 pass attempts in this game. 37. Moving on. In an actually exciting game, possibly the best game. Actually, I said this was going to be the best game of the entire weekend. There was one game that was better. This is the second best game, in my personal opinion. Chargers 30, Chiefs 24. This is the game where I picked the upset from Brandon Staley as a head coach and I felt pretty confident about it because, like I said, I feel like the Chargers are more talented than the Chiefs are, like across the board, and it seemed to be that way. A vast majority of this game, the Chargers were able to generate 3 different turnovers. 2 of them were interceptions. One of them was a fumble recovered. The Chargers' turnovers and the Chargers' aggression, I feel like, is what led them in this game, because there was a good chunk of time where the Chiefs were in the midst of coming back and the Chargers' offense was just non-existent, right? They had multiple periods of time where they were up by multiple possessions. By the end of halfway through the second quarter, the Chargers were up 14-0. The Chiefs didn't score until right before halftime, and it was 14-3 off of a field goal attempt. They came out there and they scored, 10 points? I want to say... Yeah, they scored 10 points. No, they scored a touchdown unanswered in the course of this one. So this one gets back and forth, a lot of back and forth action, and there's a good chunk of time in the third quarter where the Chargers just can't do anything offensively, right? And it doesn't have a ton to do with the pressure that they were generating, but the fact of the matter is the Kansas City Chiefs defensive line without Frank Clark went out there and they played very, very well. They put themselves in a position to get back into that game. They got a couple of stops, which is really impressive considering how much pressure the Chargers offense was putting on them with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Austin Eckler had a couple of good runs to go along with it as well. But they were distributing the ball really well. I think it was like 6 receivers touched the ball when Justin Herbert threw the ball, or when Justin Herbert was passing the ball. He had almost 40 pass attempts in this game. He 26-38. He had 4 touchdowns, and they won by 6 points. That's the kind of game. That's the kind of stuff we were dealing with here. That's the level of play we were dealing with here. Justin Herbert, in a clutch situation, stepped up, did the damn thing. And on the other hand, we have Patrick Mahomes, who got sacked twice. He threw three touchdowns, 2 interceptions. One of those interceptions was the final potential game-winning drive that I felt like a lot of people, knowing Patrick Mahomes, thought he was going to get down there in a couple of plays. But nonetheless, the Chargers are not only familiar with what the Chiefs do, but on top of that, like I said before, I feel like they have more talent across the board. We saw a lot of Byron Pringle touching the ball. Not a great situation. Mecole Hardman had a couple of good catches. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, underrated, fumbled the ball away. Yes, had a 100-yard rushing game off 17 carries. That's pretty damn good, especially for a guy who's just a second-year running back. And I know a lot of people are like losing their shit because he turned the ball over or whatever. But the fact of the matter is like when Clyde did not turn the ball over, he was running really well. I mean, you can go back and watch the game. I watched it from beginning to end, and I was impressed with his running because it's the best I've seen him play in the NFL since that Week 1 game like last year. So he did a killer job in this situation. But for the most part, this came down to the Chargers defense not only putting pressure on Patrick Mahomes, but on top of that, they did a killer job of the secondary coverage. It felt like every time Patrick Mahomes completed a pass, there was a defender in the direct near vicinity. In particular, passes to Tyreek Hill. They had multiple times where they cut away to one-on-one situations with Tyreek Hill, and the corners just were like step for step with Tyreek Hill, the guy who's like the fastest dude in the NFL. They got 16 pressures on Patrick Mahomes. Only 2 of them turned into a sack, but nonetheless, they turned it up. 16 pressures on a guy like Patrick Mahomes is really, really impressive when it's all said and done. But yeah, that's the situation. 0 broken tackles in the course of this game is very impressive. This is a huge win for the Chargers, and I'm glad the logic worked out in this one because very few times does logic work when you're talking about how the Chiefs are going to play. Also, I'd like to point out something that made me a little scared. It was like a Space Jam took my power type vibe where like they take the powers of the NBA players and put it into the ball and then they take it and become the Monstars. Patrick Mahomes had a no-look pass that was deflected and almost intercepted. And I was like, oh, wow, that interesting. Disturbing because usually that's easy stuff for him. Anyway, moving on, 28-13 was the final score. The Saints beat the Patriots, as we all suspected. They were able to go out there. The Saints scored a touchdown in every single quarter of this game, which is in my personal opinion, that's kind of how I demarcate who's a good and a bad offense if you score over 28 points, because that's 1 touchdown a game or whatever, or however many combinations of field goals that is. But nonetheless, he did his thing. He did the thing where he had like under 200 passing yards, but also like 2 passing touchdowns. The Patriots had 3 turnovers. One of them was for a pick 6, and the Saints were able to pull off 142 rushing yards after that performance, a week ago where they forgot that Alvin Kamara existed versus the Panthers. 2 of the 11 drives for the Saints started in Patriots territory. Why is that important? Because it means that it's an indicator of how efficient not only the passing was, but also the rushing, because they had 11 drives and Jameis Winston still had under 200 passing yards and still passed the ball over 20 times. Let me double check, make sure, because I'm pretty sure Jameis Winston finished in like 3rd or 4th in pass attempts this week, which is wild to think about. Here we go. Let me double check this one. How many pass attempts did Jameis Winston have? He had 21, so not too many. Never mind. Forget that. I'm thinking of, well, I was just wrong on that. Anyway, pick 6, 142 rushing yards, put the pressure on one young Mac Jones, put the pressure on him. They got 12 pressures in total in this game. So that tells you all you really need to know. I will say some of the turnovers went off the hands of receivers. So, yeah. Washington played the Bills. Well, the Bills played the Washington football team. It was 43-21, and it was because the Washington defense forgot how to play defense. What a surprise. Back-to-back weeks where the Washington football team has surrendered more than 30 points a game. It's really wild to think about, but hey, that is also not a surprise they played the Bills, but it was a surprise when they did it against the Giants. So, yeah. Raiders-Dolphins in overtime in Vegas to win in front of the home crowd and everything like that. I will point out the Dolphins had Jacoby Brissett still doing his thing, slinging that thing out there. But for the most part, this came down to pressure that was generated off the edge by Max Crosby, who once again turning the fuck up this season. Tearing it up and kept doing it versus the Miami Dolphins, who obviously are very limited offensively with Jacoby Brissett and the quality of wide receiver they have across the board. And I say that, you know, we saw the situation. They had an 85-yard, they had a pick six that was returned for 85 yards for the touchdown, right? And then pretty much everything else came from the offense. So they really scored under 21 points in the course of this game, which is not great, but it's not terrible. They went out there and they did their thing. They had 14 points, and they did not score again until the fourth quarter, by the way. I thought that was the funniest thing to come out of this game. They scored 14 points in the first half of the game and did not score again until late in the fourth off of a 46-yard field goal. They forced overtime, and Derek Carr got a little risky with the ball, and it paid off for him when it was all said and done. But the defense did their thing. The Raiders, for some reason, tried to take down the clock to like basically 0 seconds, and I'm assuming that's like an attempt to practice for a situation later on, but nonetheless, very annoying if you're watching overtime because all they had to do was kick the field goal, and once you kick the field goal, the game is over. Like, time doesn't matter. They don't get another possession afterwards. Have to wonder if John Gruden perhaps forgot. But 497 total yards in this game to go with the 3 total touchdowns when it was all said and done. One of those were rushing, by the way. But yeah, it was a killer game. Once again, something is up with the Dolphins in passing the ball. So when Jacoby took over for Tua Tagovailoa the week before, he had like 40 pass attempts as a backup. He had 49 in this game. 49 pass attempts. He completed 32 of them, but it was for 215 yards. So, you know, a lot of swing down routes. If you go watch it, a lot of check down routes. Anyway, moving on. The Broncos played the Jets. The final score is 26-0. Is that enough? Can I move on? Okay, I'm going to move on. Yes, ladies and gents, we're going to be late. It's all good. Vikings versus Seahawks. This was super disappointing. As you know, I'm your resident Seattle Seahawks fan here in Houston, Texas. The Texans are my second favorite team. The Seahawks are my first one. So we made the official swap. I was actually looking at merch to buy while I was at work yesterday. So, yeah, you know, more merch. I actually have a Bobby Wagner shirt. I have a bucket hat, a Seattle Seahawks bucket hat, and a Seattle Seahawks just like regular hat that I wear. That I bent the bill of because I didn't like the material's weird. It's a discussion for another day. Final score is 30-17 in this game. This was, if you go back and watch the game, a lot of this was directly connected to the soft zone that seems to be the only off defensive set that the Seattle Seahawks know how to play. Cover 3, basically, and cover 3 out of a two high shell, I believe, is the exact way to describe what they do. But anyway, yeah. So they allowed a lot of passes to be completed over the middle and a lot of yak yards. Justin Jefferson's very good already, but also giving him a 15-yard cushion, not the best idea. So a lot of people have been pointing fingers at Trey Flowers, which, hey, if after that game, the only person that you can point at as Trey Flowers to be the problem, I don't think you're watching enough football. So they went out there and they kind of tried to keep pace, but nonetheless, The defensive line, once again, for the Minnesota Vikings looks to be real and in charge. Danielle Hunter had a hell of a game versus the Seattle Seahawks. We're still, a lot of people are pointing out that, like, Patrick Peterson, not washed up like everybody rumored he was. Because you probably shouldn't take the word of the Arizona Cardinals when it comes to quality of defensive players. So there's a reason that Patrick Peterson wanted to trade out of that situation. Cam Dantzler, not looking terrible in the course of this game, but they started off hot as they usually do. If you guys don't know, the Seattle Seahawks MO for the last 2 years really has been they kill it in the first half, and then whatever happened in the first half better be enough to win the second half, because ain't shit happening in the second half. And they did it again. So the Minnesota Vikings scored 30 points in the entirety of this game. They scored 9 in the second half. They scored 21 in the first half. The Seattle Seahawks scored 17 points in this game. 17 were in the first half, and none were in the second half. They scored like 9 points total in the first 3 games of the season in the second half. Straight up. And it's the same thing. Like, people talk about how, like, they don't make adjustments. One thing that I will say, the pressure got to him in the second half, and the pressure got to Russell Wilson. He did not do a great job of escaping, because he shouldn't have to escape every other fucking play. But hey, what do I know? I'm just a dude who watches football on Sundays, right? DK Metcalf had a huge game, 107 yards when it was all said and done, and a touchdown to go along with it. His plays were pretty astounding. The secondary for the Minnesota Vikings was out there hitting, and DK Metcalf, when the violence starts is when his best attributes start to shine. Nonetheless, Kirk Cousins chopped him up again, 323 yards, 3 touchdowns, and this is one of those games why you hate Kirk Cousins, because the bad is bad and the good is pretty good. He went out there and he did his thing against the defense, a soft zone, and he got aggressive with it because he was pushing the ball down the field. There's no question about that. Alexander Mattison, not Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Mattison went out there and did a great job of replacing Dalvin Cook while he is down and hurt and out of the play so far. Down and hurt, out for this week, and as he did last year, Alexander Mattison looked really good. So no surprise that he continues to carry that forward. The offensive line for the Vikings held up just enough because when it was all said and done, I don't think there was too much pressure to be said for. Yeah, it was 9 pressures when it was all said and done. 9 is decent. They got 1 sack when it was all said and done. But hey, one thing to take out: the Seattle Seahawks, they were not like a 9 pressure team last year. They were looking pretty desperate in terms of like the ability to generate pressure. So that's one positive on the defensive side of things this entire season so far. They are getting pressure on the quarterback, not like they did last year. So yeah, that being said, Chris Carson had a killer run that helped out the offense in the first half of the game, but as usual, the lack of adjustment for the second half absolutely destroyed them. So yeah, the Seattle Seahawks are now 1-2 on the season. So they lose a game that they could have very easily won. The Vikings go out there and they turned up. I like the way that they played that game. If they continue to be that aggressive, they're gonna win a lot of football games here in the NFC North. Sorry about that. And now I go to the most exciting game of the entire. Second most exciting game. No, my bad. I'm one away. I jumped ahead. The Rams played the Buccaneers. 34-24 was the final score in this one. A shit ton of pressure from the Rams up front on one Tom Brady. And just like every other human being that has like blood flowing through their veins and a heart in their chest, when you put pressure on them, they don't make the best decisions when it's all said and done. And to try and say that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers went out there and played a shit game is a little tough. They looked bad in the first half and they picked it up in the second, right? Like they had 17 points in the second half of this game. A lot of people were really upset about the defensive presence of the secondary. It felt like they were not there when it was all said and done. Most people, when you line up against Deshaun Jackson, feels like they're not there either, mainly because they're not in the same frame as Deshaun when he's running. There was a situation where Deshaun could have had another touchdown, and I couldn't tell if it was like Matthew Stafford ran out of juice on his arm in terms of the throw, or he threw it at the wrong time or something like that, or if it is if Deshaun Jackson like misread the situation and ran too far upfield. Either way, it was a touchdown that could have happened that did not. But nonetheless, the Rams went out there and they did their thing. I told you about Cooper Kupp turning up for sure. Deshaun Jackson had 5 catches and over 100 yards in the course of that game. and the run game started to work. By the way, that was the most frustrating part. That's the most frustrating part about the last couple of weeks so far in the NFL season. Everybody's just chalked up like, oh, you don't run on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You don't run on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And the Rams were one of the few teams that were going out there and willing to challenge them because their offense has to persist on some sort of running. And then on top of that, would you rather go out there and run the ball and make the defense have to go out there and pursue the run? Or would you rather them go out there and the defense know that you're going to pass the ball every single time you do? They got 24 carries for 76 yards and 0 touchdowns in this game, right? Like every touchdown they scored, was a passing touchdown in the course of this game. But the willingness to run the ball paid off for the Rams, even though they didn't do it all that well. 24 carries to 76 yards, not great, but nonetheless, there was some progress when it was all said and done, and that's the important part. Making people have to come and get you. Making people have to figure out where the ball is. They don't need to know that Matthew Stafford's just going to hold on to the ball for the entire game, especially in the back half of it. And the Rams got out there early. They got the lead early, and they were able to keep the pressure on and give Tom Brady, who, by the way, threw for over 400 yards in this game, but only one touchdown. Crazy to think about. But yeah, that's the reality of the situation. That's how good the defense is for the Rams. And you could talk about bend, don't break, and that's basically the definition of bend, don't break. 432 yards with 3 sacks. And one passing touchdown allowed when it was all said and done. And I'm looking at the pressure numbers. Yeah, Tom Brady got pressured 11 times, which is bad, especially for a guy who's an older quarterback for sure. And then 6 times is how many times Matthew Stafford got pressured. And he went out there and he played really well. Went toe for toe with the greatest of all time, right? Went tit for tat with the greatest of all time. Deshaun Jackson, by the way, has the most 50-yard passing touch, 50-yard plus yard touchdowns, and then also tied for the most 50-yard plus receptions. The Packers, 38-28 is the score in this game. And quite frankly, everybody's talking about how clutch Aaron Rodgers is, and they should. Aaron Rodgers went out there and played an amazing final drive in the course of that game. He kept the pressure on. He kept turning up, and he really kept pushing the ball down the field, and he helped Aaron Jones get some open run lanes to be able to get some yards for sure. And then on top of that, they went out there and they did what they always do. They're the Packers. They're very efficient in terms of how they get up and down the field, and they did a killer job of attacking the 49ers over the middle, which is a scary thought to think about because the 49ers defense is like filled with a lot of talented football players. There's no question about that whatsoever. But the most impressive part was definitely, for me personally, Jimmy Garoppolo. Like Jimmy Garoppolo went out there and not only pushed the ball down the field, but also was he pushed the ball down the field for sure, but he was attacking over the middle. Like there was multiple times where Deebo Samuels was trying to catch a ball while cutting towards the middle of the field, which of course is like when you do drop back zones is the most difficult part to defend because you never know who's going to be able to jump in and out or run in between the seams of the defensive zones, right? So when it's all said and done, I felt like he did a good job of distributing the ball all over the field, not just on one side or not just in one area of the field. Like we've seen some teams in particular this season really struggle to get the ball up the field down the sideline or complete passes off the sideline perimeter outside the numbers. And then there are plenty of players who can complete it over the middle, right? And that's the interesting part about this when it's all said and done. I thought that especially in the second half, Jimmy Garoppolo played some of the best football I've seen him play in like 2 years. And I think if you go back and watch that game, you can say it. You can understand why I would say something like that. He got pressured 14 times in the course of this game, and that showed itself for sure. Because the Packers D-line throughout especially the second half, they took it to like a whole nother level. And they don't have one of their best pass rushers, right? Like they don't have Zaire Smith out there because he's on IR, but everybody else is getting pressure. And it wasn't just coming from one person. Rashawn Gary got back-to-back sacks in the course of this game on Jimmy Garoppolo, and I feel like a lot of people didn't give him credit for it. Jimmy Garoppolo got sacked 4 times. And in the course of this game, you guessed it, ladies and gentlemen, I looked at his air yards. I had to. He had 143. Aaron Rodgers had 161. He had 143 of his 257 actual air yards down the field. Look at that. Jimmy Garoppolo throws the ball down the field. All of a sudden, the 49ers look like one of the best teams in the NFL. If only he could do that every single week. I thought that was the kind of story of this game. Not only was it Aaron Rodgers doing Aaron Rodgers things, who's surprised. Literally, we were making jokes about it in the group chat. My favorite phrase has now become, I think I've seen this movie before. And then when you get the comeback lead or when you get in the situation for the game-winning kick, you're like, yeah, I've 100% seen this movie before. Davante Adams got killed and came back to life. That's pretty impressive. That's a really impressive skill. I don't think that's in his scouting report, but the 49ers defensively, especially in the second half, the secondary got kind of picked apart, especially if you look at that final drive by the Packers. They were able to get that ball to Davante Adams for that catch to get in position for the field goal because Davante Adams was indeed in single coverage. There was like no safety help on that side. He cut middle, and whoever was supposed to be in charge of covering the deepest deep wasn't there, and that is what happened. That's kind of what set it up overall, but nonetheless, great performance, I think, on the side of both of these teams, and I know the 49ers are the team that's going to take the L in this situation. The Packers look good. The 49ers look good. Both of those teams look like playoff teams. There's no question about that whatsoever. Moving on to Monday Night Football, there's a couple things that upset me about this. One, the Eagles completely abandoning the run. The Eagles had 6 carries in total on let me double check that. They had 6 carries in total to run the ball. Straight up. They had like 6 rushing attempts. Let me make sure that is correct. Oh, my bad. They had 12 rushing attempts for 64 yards in this game. 2 of those rushing attempts went to Miles Sanders, and I'm pretty sure that's where the 64 yards came from. 2 carries for 27 yards is where the carries came from for Miles Sanders. 9 of those were scrambles by Jalen Hurts for 35 yards. I felt like the Eagles got suckered into playing the Cowboys game. I felt like they got suckered into trying to go out there and play like blow for blow in terms of like big play down the field with the Cowboys. And if that's the case, brilliant tactical mastermind Mike McCarthy, and analytics specialist Mike McCarthy went out there and killed the game, which is probably why he called that timeout right before halftime, which would have, got him an extra minute that they could have used to drive down the field and possibly score a field goal. Oh, wait, he didn't. Anyway, 2 for 27 from Miles Sanders, completely abandoning the run. It's kind of embarrassing. And by the way, one of those carries was for 24 yards. So it's not to say that he went out there and like got huge yardage on 2 different carries. He got 1 carry that went for 24 yards, and then they just stopped handing him the ball. They got Kenneth Gainwell 1 carry. He got 2 yards off of it. I find it kind of moronic to not go back and check to see if, hey man, maybe, just maybe, if we gave these guys more carries, our offense could find a way to get to shorter third down situations instead of us having to force Jalen Hurts to figure out how to get through 3rd and 11 penalties. I will say there were multiple penalties that happened on 3rd down that made it 3rd and 19. There were multiple first or second, or there were multiple downs that they had to get to the line to gain that was over 20 yards away. That'll tell you how successful you can be as an offense, especially if you got penalties that are putting you in just that bad of a situation. The pressure was pretty bad up front in terms of what Jalen Hurts had to deal with. It was excellent performances, not only by Micah Parsons, but the entire Cowboys defense. Trayvon Diggs, who, by the way, has an interception every single week of this season. I think he has multiple pick sixes. And on top of that, the Cowboys have an interception. They have multiple interceptions or multiple turnovers every week for the first 3 weeks of the NFL season. It's wild to think about, but that's it. The Cowboys are playing not only like a playoff team, they're playing like a divisional champ. I said it after week 1. Dak Prescott looks like he's better than ever, and he's looking like he's putting it on him. And in response, there's a drive on here that Dak Prescott, he got 43 yards in 3 plays that resulted in an interception, right? The first drive of... Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong side. The first drive of the game was 75 yards off of 6 plays. And then there was a 61-yard drive off of 12 plays later on in this game. Like, their versatility in their offense is ridiculous. Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott, basically both being starting caliber running backs, is helping out a ton. Dalton Schultz was on fire in the second half of that game. And on top of that, I don't know if this is on purpose to shit on the Eagles or not, but I respect the hell out of Mike McCarthy for running that score up. I like it. I liked it a lot. The Eagles got outscored in every single quarter of this game. They either got outscored or they tied in every single quarter of this game. The Cowboys scored 2 touchdowns in the first half. They scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And they kept it on. They kept their foot on the gas. They ran away from the Eagles and they stayed away from the Eagles throughout the course of this game. There was at no point where the Eagles held a lead. It was a wire-to-wire victory, and they played damn near flawless football up and down the field. They had great protection overall. They had one turnover. They did give up, and this is what I'm talking about. The Eagles had 13 penalties for 86 yards in this game. And I feel like that's what shot him in the foot. Plus abandoning the run, and then 2, Jalen Hurts being under immense amount of pressure and only being able to get out of one read. I felt like it's something that was a product of it. And in comparison, the Cowboys, who scored 41 points in this game, had 41 carries for their running backs. And that's the team that was in the lead. And I get, you can talk about, oh, they were trying to kill the clock, man. And it's like the versatility in your offenses. Having versatility in your offense is far more valuable than having a drive that you can throw the ball deep down the field for like possibly 30 yards or incomplete pass. And in the case of the Eagles, they were so predictable when they were going down the field. The base coverage that the Cowboys were running was able to not only shut down their underneath game, but anything that was deep down the field, they were never really challenging the safeties for the Cowboys because they weren't sending enough people deep down the field. But hey, what do I know? Just a dude that watches football on a Sunday. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, that is week 3 of the NFL season. Week 4, we'll talk about it tomorrow because we're doing back-to-back days because I didn't do it on Tuesday like I was supposed to for the full NFL breakdown. Follow me on Twitter at FB_playbook for funsies and sports stuff as well. Follow my personal account at TheAshtonJ. Follow my Instagram, TheAshtonForever, where I do more sportsy stuff and workout stuff and all that kind of stuff like that. And on that note, I got to get out of here because I'm already late for work. Later. Oh, my bad. I forgot. Wash your hands. Wash your ass. If you have access to a full shower, please utilize it. Please. Go home, Roger. Close.